Action.
The New Jersey Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Belvidere Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted with the Star Ledger and the Express Times, and submitted to the town clerk of the town of Belvidere on October 4th, 2024. The meeting will be live streamed at www.belvideresd.org. Flag salute, please. Flag salute, please.
Just did that.
Sorry, mission.
Wasn't good enough.
I am a mess tonight, I'm sorry. We'll do it again.
Mr. Ackerman?
Here.
Mr. Blum? Dr. Zuppeth?
Here.
Mrs. Duckworth?
Here.
Mrs. Gleen? Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mrs. Steffen? Mrs. Serbone? Mrs. Wenner?
Here.
Mr. Ciccarelli?
Here.
Mrs. Gardella?
Here.
Mrs. Robotham?
Here.
The mission of the Belvidere School District is to celebrate our past and empower our future while focusing on the four cornerstones of our district: tradition, excellence, academics, and community. We strive to build confidence and promote collaboration. We encourage an equal partnership with our students and staff as well as its community members. We empower everyone to develop the best versions of themselves. The Belvidere School District is committed to shaping students into global citizens who take initiative for their success and contribute to the continued excellence of the district. Our students are leaders in the decision-making process of their education and will be prepared to excel in 21st century society. Okay, we are on to the Board of Education and CSA goals.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Mitchell. I don't think I've met some of you, but I haven't met all of you. So I was just recently given parts of Warren County. So super excited to be here. And we're going to do a couple of things tonight. So we're going to go over the board self-evaluation. That will give us an idea of possible board goals, because I looked on your website, and unless I was remiss, I didn't really see board goals. I did see, that the district goals, and we do have some proposed goals from your superintendent that we're going to go over tonight. But I think we should start with the board self-evaluation and make it really discussion-based so that we can understand where we want to be as a board and those board goals. And keep in mind, the board goals are something that is professional development for the board. It's something that helps, support the district goals as well. So it's those exercises that we put into the board goals that we can accomplish during that year. And we get that from going over this board self-evaluation. So I understand it was a heavy lift to do this. It's a big task. But I think it's really important that we have the conversations about the 9 different buckets, that subject matter that we go through. And there were some really good comments that will show some growth on our part as a board, and I think it'll be quite helpful. So in your packet, you're going to see the overview. It's the board self-evaluation overview. That's the document that I'm going to go over with you. Underneath that is the actual evaluation itself. And that's about 18 pages. But this is only 3 pages that we're going to go, and it'll just give a summary, and we'll talk about that. So when I go over this, I'll be talking about the GLOWs, which is the things that the board is doing fantastic and really showcases in this board self-evaluation. And then there's the GROWs. Those are the things that you made comments on that you feel that maybe you need a little growth on, some more attention to. So we'll talk about what that looks like too. But in the top part, there you'll see the scores. So in planning, you had a 1.8, and keep in mind that the scores themselves, when we see a 3 or under, we think that it should have some growth. Yes?
Oh, I'm just paying attention.
You're paying, oh, that is so great. Thank you for paying attention.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, I guess I am. I should talk to my husband and say, hey, somebody's paying attention, that was good.
No,
I'm
I
not
just
used
heard
to,
1.8 was underneath, and we needed to work on that, so boom, that got. my
that got you
attention right
going, okay. So, anything under a 3. So planning is a 1.8, policy was 2.5, student achievement 2.6, finance 2.4, board operation 2.9, board performance 3.3. So that's great that you're doing quite well with that. Board and superintendent relationships, a 3, which is fantastic. Then board and staff relationships, 2.7, and board and community, 2.4. So let's start with planning. So obviously, the board feels that that's an important aspect because that's why we're here today, to go over some planning with the board goals and the district goals. So the glowing remarks with the board is that the board recognizes the importance of that planning and the goal setting. But some of the gross you did comment on that said that, you needed maybe a monitoring process on how you look at those goals and how you monitor those goals, maybe schedule them along the way with your meetings, and then set a plan to gain feedback from the community. Those were the 2 glaring comments that you feel like you need a little growth. So what I'd like to do is open up the floor to talk about that and talk about how we can get to the next level. So when you're doing, I noticed when you do your board, your evaluation of the CSA, that is something that you did comment that you felt that to reflect on those district goals, it was hard for you because you haven't along the way planned on going over the action plan. So is that something that you feel that you could do some scheduling in for your meetings?
What would an action plan look like? Like, how could you?
Right, so today, we're going to make those district goals, and we're going to set those and say, this is what we want to focus on for 2024, 2025. So then we say, okay, we all agree on that. We hand them over to the superintendent. The superintendent takes those and says, okay, here are the goals. Now I'm going to make action plans. And that's going to be the how piece. So the board is the what with the goals, and the superintendent is the how. The action plans are that how. So how are we going to get to that goal? And when you do the CSA evaluation, that's a component that you're actually, rating whether the goal was achieved or not based on that evidence of, did we do those action plans? Did we accomplish that goal? And is it achieved?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's easier for boards if they schedule those updates along the way in their meeting schedule. So that way, when you sit down to do that CSA evaluation, it makes it so much easier because you're not rifling through files trying to figure out, is it achieved or is it not? You've had those conversations all along the way, so you should be able to easily grade those. Does that make sense?
And would that be a committee, or you're saying like as a group, we would meet
No, as a
separately, or we
group, you
do it
should have
today?
group discussion on that, certainly at a public meeting. So that way, the community can be engaged in the goals. Because sometimes when you think about when you set goals, you don't want it to just be checking the box, right? Where, okay, we did the district goals, and now we just kind of push them aside. You really want to work towards those. So you want to make them of value. And then you also want to bring the community in on the knowledge of where you are with them. So it's super important to schedule that for a public meeting and have that really good discussion. So the superintendent would report out, and the board could ask questions on some of those activities. So that should be about 3 times a year. So you're going to adopt the goals next meeting. We're going to work on them tonight. You'll adopt them next meeting. The superintendent will talk about the action plans for those goals and a timeline, what it looks like to achieve those goals, like an indicator of success. And then you would probably have your first update right in the beginning of the year, probably sometime in January.
Okay.
And then in the spring, like March, and then right before that CSA evaluation, you start doing that in May. So that's how I would schedule it for your meeting schedule. And then that way you'll have that knowledge when you go to sit down to do that task. Because that task is a lot, right? You know, and you just want to be able to easily understand what you're doing with that. So that was one of the feedbacks from the board, saying that they would like to see that and would like to understand how those action plans come into play and the goals themselves. Now, the board can do that as well. So when we make the board goals tonight and we talk about those, you adopt them at the next meeting, and then we'll work towards those. And then the board can designate possibly the president to report out on where you are with those goals. Sometimes the board president will hand it over to a committee. If you have like a governance committee, they will report out on how you're doing with those goals.
One of the things, if I could, when it says possible communication committee, and then you also talked about feedback from the community.
Yeah,
I think it's important that we as a board establish some form of communication committee so that when we do have public comment or questions or concerns, that we have a forum or a time set within the board meeting to address the prior. What's that? Oh, sorry. So what I was saying is that we would have a committee that we can address concerns or questions from a previous meeting from the community, so that we have the time slotted where maybe, you know, the president or committee chairperson would talk about, you know, what those action items were, or questions or concerns that the community had expressed in the next meeting, then we can address that, like also set a little time aside that might be separate from this planning, but it just kind of got me thinking about also that communication committee and how I think that would be a value add, so that we can incorporate the community and let them know that they're being heard, and, you know, we are working on those actionable items that they would like to see something on.
yeah, because as I read your board self-evaluation, it was constantly mentioned that you feel like you're not in touch with that community piece, like the community input. There's like a disconnect there, right? So bridging that gap was really important to all of you. You all consistently wrote about that. So in order to do that, that's a great idea to, you know, write down the notes of somebody coming up to the mic and making a comment, and then doing a follow-up session, so that way they know that their voice is heard. Because if you think about it, if somebody comes out or emails or what have you as a public comment, it's not a public discussion time, right? It's just a public comment, so we don't do a dialogue back and forth. But how frustrating that must be when you get the courage to come up and say something and then feel like it kind of fell short.
Right, right.
So I think it's really important to have that follow-up, whether you follow up the next day or you follow up at the next meeting. But a lot of times, if a community member comes to the mic and says something, it's of interest to the entire community. So I think it's important to be able to answer back and say, we had a public comment last meeting, and we just want to update the community on this situation,
Right,
you know?
I think we do. I've seen you do that a bunch of
Sometimes,
times.
depends.
I've seen you do it in the same meeting.
Yeah. So that bridges that gap, you know? So, and then there was a lot of comments on a mechanism for community members to give their input. Is there anything that you're doing to do that to gain more of the community's aspiration for student achievement? It's really super important to understand. And some boards will have the district send out a climate survey. Some boards will have an event where the community gets together and does mission and vision together with the board. And that's always a really great way to get that. Some boards do strategic planning, and that's a really great way to have community input. So there's all different ways, but when you have that community committee, sometimes that is really helpful too, because they could come up with really good ideas of what they could do.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any type of committee like that. Sometimes the boards will have stakeholders on that committee as well, so that they can gain input from them. So I think that that's why you had the 1.8 on planning. I think it was more about understanding where you are, really working on those goals and those action plans, understanding that, and then just having a mechanism for understanding where you are, that monitoring system. It seems like that's where the score went down. So I think that if we put all of that into play, then we'll be able to raise that score for next year, definitely. Anybody else on planning? So then we'll move on to policy. So the board reviews and updates policy manual regularly, and policy is referred to when issues arise, so that's great. Some of the growth is to continue use of board policy as a basis for decision-making, gain more knowledge in adjusting and customizing policy, more board discussion on policy, and then understanding board operates as a policy-making body. So we just did, in Sussex County, we just did a really good county meeting, and we had our director of policy, Kim Gotti, speak. And she talked about when is a good time to change a policy. And when a board is having an issue with something, is it best to do it in that moment, or is it better to just wait until after that situation calms itself down and then changing the policy? And that was one of the questions that was asked, and she said that she felt that you're best off waiting until that situation kind of clears its way out and then changing the policy. So that's just something to be mindful of. Another tip that she said was when you do go through the policy manual, a lot of times you feel really super comfortable with a certain policy, but that it might be 20, 15 years old. For those, you should have them updated, even if you use the same language, just to update them and make them current, she said is a good practice to do. Do you have a policy committee?
We do.
You could, okay. And we use stress assessment too. Oh, great, okay, yeah. So, there's sometimes when the policy isn't matching the procedure, it's really important to make sure that it does that. So every once in a while to do that. The other thing that I wanted to let you know is New Jersey School Boards does a free policy wellness check. So just be mindful of that you can the board president send an email to me and we can get that going for you. And that's part of your dues. So it's something that is, I think, really helpful.
That's good.
Any questions on policy? No? So then student achievement, that's the majority of what we're here for, correct? So the board agrees that student achievement is top priority, and the board agrees that continuous updates and focus on growth should be a priority. Some of the grows was continue to identify and understand the community's expectations and educational aspirations. So we talked about that. So we'll work on gaining more of that input. And then create a monitoring process with input and data from administration on instructional programming and more group discussions on that. And then also understanding district goals as they pertain to student achievement. That was one of the comments that I saw over and over again, that you just didn't feel connected to your district goals as it pertains to student achievement. So why don't we chat about that a little bit? Anybody have any comments on that? So as a board, what do you think, how do you support student achievement?
We do have a student board member that comes to the meetings and reports out on the student activities and recognitions overall for the school. And we also do have some of the sports teams come to the board meetings just to showcase or highlight some of the good successes that they're having. Those are things that I can think of off the top of my head from a student achievement, but academically, there may be a little bit more opportunity as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They come in, they'll perform or talk about their experience. We had kids go to Europe over the summer, and about a half a dozen of them showed up. I think Chris went on that trip, and they talked about their experiences. So we actually chat with the students.
That's great. So you gain that
Yeah.
input from them. That's fantastic. Yeah. Good. Okay. Then we'll move on to finance, everybody's favorite topic. So the board exercises financial oversight. The board balances the educational needs of students with the impact of budgetary increases, and you operate with a timely budget process. So you're starting that soon. In November, the budget process starts, even though you're not voting on the budget for quite some time. That's what's happening with the B.A. and the administration. So they're starting all of that now. Some of the growth was you felt that you needed more in-depth understanding of the financial reports and a little bit more training on board members' role in the budget process. So, so when you do get those financial reports, do you have a discussion about that? Are you struggling to understand them in any way? Do you need more time with them, do you feel?
Need more money.
You need more money. Absolutely, yeah. So, and then as a board with understanding the budget process, does everybody feel that they are equipped enough that's a big learning curve, right? When you come on the board to understand that process. So sometimes I'll recommend to boards to have like a little cheat sheet with all the, names of things like, that you would just maybe not understand. So that way, when you're having those discussions, you have that as like a little glossary. Sometimes that's helpful. And certainly when you get new board members, I don't know if you're having any new board members come on soon with the election, that onboarding process, to have maybe them sit with the BA, the superintendent, and understand that financial aspect. Because that's a big learning curve, and if you could get ahead of that, it'd be super helpful.
I think our big problem is retaining board members for longer than a year or two.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Just recently, I think just recently, we filled up our final seats, and so they have some catching up to do, and understanding what's going on. But for a while, we were operating with 8 or 9 people on a 12-member board.
Oh, gosh.
So it was more difficult because we did it, but that's part of the problems that we have.
Yeah, yeah.
Might be unique to here, but nobody's interested in doing it.
Wow, okay. Well, it's a big commitment, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work. And thank you all for your service, because it is a big commitment. But maybe that onboarding will help so that the newer board members feel like they're getting what they need so that they can do the work and don't feel so stressed about it, that type of thing.
That would be something, put together like an onboarding checklist for board members, because I'm newish, maybe a little over a year now, and it was kind of like, learn as you go. There was no real, like, here's a process, here's who you go to for this, and things like that. Here's the rules, things of that nature. So maybe like an onboarding package of some sort or something. Like, I would have never thought to sit down with Shelley and look at financials as a board member.
Yeah, because we're doing candidates briefing now for people that are running. We just did one last week. We're doing another one next week. And that was one of the tips that I said to, when you get elected, ask for an appointment to sit with the BA or the superintendent and just ask those questions and have a little bit of onboarding, because it's really helpful. The other thing that we're doing now as New Jersey School Boards is right before your county meeting in December, we're going to have the 3 Rs, and that'll explain rules, responsibilities, things like that, your role as a board member. And I think that's really helpful too. It's really made a big difference. But I think when I was board president, I think the best thing for my board members, my newer board members, was my mentor program, where I would assign a mentor based on the personality of the new person coming in. And then that way, they didn't feel uncomfortable asking questions at the board table. They could at least, ask those questions like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? What does banked cap mean? Things like that, because you'd feel uncomfortable asking those questions, right? So maybe come up with a mentor program where some board members feel comfortable with being a mentor to that new board member. Maybe that'll help, have a retention type of situation with that.
I think that's a good idea.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because sometimes if you just feel like you're just not connected, then those board members just drop off, so.
So you said that meeting's in December then? Does any newly elected board member get to go to that meeting then?
Yes.
Since they're
so
not actually
they're not
until
sworn in
January?
yet. Yeah. So what we do is we send them an email, and from New Jersey School Boards, we send them an email congratulating them on being elected, and then inviting them to the county meeting where they can go ahead and start right away.
Okay. Is that new? 'Cause that-
It was done last year, so
Okay, yeah, 'cause I was gonna say,
it's relatively
first I'm
new.
hearing of it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
went and it was really helpful. I had actually been in my board seat for a year at that point. So like anybody can go and participate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And just kind of go through those motions. But I found that it was very, very informative. It also introduced you to your NJSBA field reps. You got to see some familiar or newer faces from a governance standpoint for NJSBA, and they kind of went over like the crux of just being a new board member and the must-have, need-to-know. So, I mean, I think anybody could really go in December if they're interested.
Yeah, and if you're a standing board member and you go, you get that statewide regional credit towards your individual certification. So if any of you are working towards an individual certification, you'll get that credit if you attend. So, and it's only about 45 minutes. It's right before the county meeting, but it's a great way to meet those new board members, and those new board members meet you. And then we let it be very discussion-based as well, so they can ask a lot of questions. So I think it's a really good program, and it's worthwhile.
Kelly, do we all get credit for this session today?
Yes.
I get credit for something.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anytime I come into your board meetings, whether it be a retreat or a meeting itself, you all get credit as a full board. So it's really important. I know that Harmony has said, committed to becoming a certified board. So maybe you all want to join the party and do that. But it's 16 credits, and so I just come in and do trainings on whatever subject matter that you feel comfortable with, and you get credits, and you're here at the meeting anyway. So, yeah.
Kelly, to Morris's point, I actually sat down over the summer, and so I work in 2 districts, but I work with over 60 board members in 12 years. So and I'm just looking at the board right now. I think Doc was here when I was hired, or he came on right after, and then I think Morris was next, and everybody else is under 3 years for sure. Well, you're
No.
probably a little more than that, but,
5?
well, I mean, like, sitting at this table right now. I know
Yeah,
Bob and
Before
Mary.
COVID.
Yeah.
'Cause
So,
I
anything we can do
started,
to keep the board members
right
consistent would be
after I
great.
started was when none of the meetings were in person, everything was online. Like as far as,
Okay.
like training, like, so there wasn't like the opportunity to go to do your board training shortly after I started.
Okay. Yeah.
That went away.
Yeah, I think you get the most out of it when you have, the conversation back and forth and you're in it, right? When
Yeah.
you're just going online, I don't think that you get
No.
the most out of it, So I think it's really important. I'm grateful to be a representative for Warren County, because I heard that Warren County really hasn't had that for a long time, and I think that's super important. So that might be part of the retention piece, is sometimes when members feel like they're kind of out in left field, they don't feel a part of something. They don't feel like they're working towards something. So then they're just like, you know what? I'm spending all this time and I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. So I think it's important.
I was going to say, many times, people's first political or elected office is school board, so it's
Yeah.
their first experience working with a budget, first experience, besides a household budget, working with a big budget. So it becomes overwhelming to them when they first start.
Yeah. So, I mean, and especially educational budget, right? Like, it doesn't even make sense.
No.
So it's so difficult, that's why we love Shelley, right? Because we have no idea how she does what she does, right? So, it's a lot. So I think that the quicker we can get to our board members and educate them and help them along, I think that retention piece is going to be there. So, we'll come up with some topics. I put them in your programs there, and we can just talk about that later on what topics you want to do, and I'll come on out and we'll do it.
Good.
Yeah. Good. So then we're going to move on, let's see, to board operation, which that scored quite well. So the board recognizes the importance of teamwork and effective decision-making. The board holds meetings in compliance with all statutes, policies, and bylaws, so that's great. Some of the grows was that, you were asking for more training and having New Jersey school boards come on in to your meetings. So we just talked about that, and that's great. And then the other thing was improved communication. It was said that you felt like maybe you weren't all connected. You felt like that some voices were not being heard. It was in a couple of different comments. It was in board operation and board performance, both collectively, that to improve communication with board members, and a lot of times maybe it's just one or two voices speaking, and then the others feel like they're not jumping in. Why don't we talk about why that is? Like, do you feel that there's an opportunity for discussion, or maybe it's the meeting's not set up that way?
Is this more like an executive session communication overall in a public
It
board
just,
meeting
it just, the
communication?
comments, when you read through it, it just said that it felt like there was certain lead voices, and then other voices weren't being heard, and that communication from board member to board member. So I just want to see, like, if maybe you want to build in opportunities. So sometimes when, let's say there's a committee report, sometimes to build in the opportunity so those other board members do feel comfortable in speaking. So you do the committee report, and then you ask, is there any comments or questions? So that gives the opportunity for somebody to jump in and ask that. Sometimes
that all the time.
when boards say that they don't
I always
have.
do that.
Oh, do you do that? Good.
Yeah, I always.
That's great, because a lot of times when boards say that type of comment where they feel like they're not able to have all voices heard, it's because there's like no pause for that in the meeting as the meeting's going on, So that's great that you do that all the time.
I think we have a lot of trust, and our committees are set up pretty well.
Good.
Even when we have new members, the question's always, what committee would you be strongest in? And I think we put a lot of trust, like we have a lot of trust. We don't have to put it in. We have trust for our committee members in finance and curriculum, and that they're doing what they need to be doing in those committees. And when the reports are done, usually I have nothing to say because I'm not on that committee, and I just trust what they're doing in there.
Yeah, you feel like they covered it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have to say, sometimes though, I think we could probably more regularly send out the minutes for all committees, or understand the committee schedule so we know that committees aren't happening, and then our expectation is that things aren't being communicated without us being aware. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like maybe a more clear committee schedule that's out there that we can access. I think that would probably be helpful, so that we're not wondering if people are meeting, but it's just not getting back to the entire board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually do send out a monthly schedule ahead of time.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like a
would-
calendar schedule, I think would be helpful, just to kind of project, and then that makes sure that we can get our feedback to you, not, the day before or week before. We kind of have some time to plan that a little bit better. I don't know.
Do you have like a Google Calendar where you put in all of those, or you just kind of send out a report saying, here's the schedule for the month?
Yeah, I'll send out a report,
Yeah.
here's the meetings for the month and the dates.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of the committees are meet as needed basis, not
Ye-
like
Yeah.
Right.
a regular, like,
Oh, they're not scheduled
No.
like once a
Like,
month?
no.
We
Okay.
usually do personnel and curriculum every month. Obviously, during
Pending.
budgeting season, we'll do finance multiple times, usually multiple times a month. I try to get all that out
Okay.
best I can.
But it's hard to find that cadence, I think, in following like items throughout the agenda, because some things are always continuing business and not always new business. So how do you
Right.
find that cadence?
Yeah, yeah. And then how do you feel about the reporting out? Do you feel that you're educated enough on that? Okay.
I think everybody does a really good job at reporting out updates. I think we had a curriculum update reported out last meeting. I think it's more just probably planning and instead of bringing your questions to the meeting, trying to get them ahead of time so it can be discussed in the committee and then that loop back to those who don't participate in those committees, kind of what is that one-on-one loop back. Melissa does a pretty good job though when she's she's able to make those and she gets back to me all the time.
yeah, I
Yeah.
try to answer anything that people send to me or
Yeah.
send it his way if I can't.
Yeah.
Good, okay. Moving on. Board superintendent and board superintendent relationship. So the GLOws are the board keeps the superintendent informed on community and school issues and aspirations, and the board respects chain of command, which is great to hear. Some of the growth would be continued discussion on student achievement and progress towards the goals. So we went over that before and talked about the mechanism for that. And then understand the CSA evaluation process. There were some questions on that. And then set a schedule to monitor the progress of the goals. So we already discussed that we were going to do that 3 times throughout the year. So understanding the CSA evaluation process, so do you use New Jersey school boards, correct, for the evaluation process?
We did not this year.
Oh, you didn't?
We did
Okay.
not this year. Have in the past, though.
Okay. Is that something that you want to do, use that, or are you comfortable with using your own?
It's up to the board. I find, to be quite honest with you, I find the New Jersey school boards one very cumbersome.
It is, yeah.
You can't upload PDFs to it, so right there, it makes it very difficult to get the right information. I have to put only Google Docs in there. Not everybody's a master at opening Google Docs, so it's hard to go through. And I'm not complaining by any means, I put a
No,
lot of
no,
time and
no, I
effort
wanna
into
hear
it,
the
and then
feedback.
if the board members can't see it or they get frustrated trying to see it, it kind of makes the process, sort of fruitless. So this year, we used the one that actually Hope Township developed, where there's a lot more narrative to it.
Okay,
That seemed to work, but, it's also a discussion for all of us, not just for me.
yeah. So there was some question with understanding the CSA evaluation. So did you struggle with that task?
I think what some of it is that, because some of it's not observable by us, like to see how the superintendent treats his staff or what he does in the building and that sort of thing. A lot of what we have to review is not necessarily observable by us.
Right.
So do we assume, no news is good news? We assume because no one's here fussing or emailing us that all is well?
Right.
So it's like the unobservable part.
Yeah, so, Chris can go ahead and build that into those updates that you're going to have 3 times a year. So that way you could talk about that type of thing where maybe there was a staff PD day that went really well and he could talk about something like that so that you can, kind of feel that culture and climate through his feedback with that. And then, like Chris said, those Google Docs would have that evidence about those type of standards the CSA has on the evaluation. So, but if you're doing more of a narrative approach, like you said, that Hope has, maybe that's structured a little bit different. I haven't seen that, so it might be structured a little bit different. That
It's a lot more user-friendly.
is it? Yeah, yeah.
I believe it leaves, like, in my opinion, when we did it, it left room for change throughout the year. So where we might have had a plan for him to do 3 main things, okay, so maybe we didn't get through all those 3 things, but the other 5 things that happened, in there, like it left a little bit more open
Room, yeah.
discussion to be like, yes, we didn't get the achievement, we're still working on it, but in the meantime, these 4 other things got thrown at us as a board and him
Sent you
to
sideways,
work
yeah.
on that were good things. So I think it left more open discussion for upcoming or newly added things that could have been good or bad in either way.
Right. And a lot of times we have to be mindful too with our goals that sometimes they're very fluid, right? Sometimes you have to adjust your sails for them. So board members have to, not be super rigid on that and understand that sometimes you have to fluctuate a little bit with some of those goals. Sometimes time and attention need to be sent somewhere else. And just like that, you had said that that was a helpful mechanism for you to be able to make that change. So that's good to hear. They are working on the CSA evaluation. We did that in conjunction with other superintendents, but they are going to work on that. They just changed the board self-evaluation, so next time you do this, it won't be as long, and it'll be a little bit more easy of a process. So that was the feedback, that it was too long, and it just was frustrating.
Do
So.
you know when that'll be live, those changes?
Yeah, so in December, they'll be doing the new board self-evaluation. The CSA evaluation, they're working on that. I don't know when that would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as the CSA evaluations and the goals, I find it hard that if we're, like, what is your recommendation as to when you set CSA goals? Because I find it hard that if you're setting them at the beginning of a school year, sometime September, and there's so much going on and it might not get done right away in September, and now it's, getting pushed back to October, and then we're doing the superintendent evaluation in May, what happened from June to August kind of gets lost in that. So I've struggled with that, and then I think that became more of an open thing when we were having the bigger discussions with the other model, is what happens to that 4 months where
Well,
like it isn't
you
accounted for?
You start the process in May, but it's just like a budget process where the superintendent starts that process. Then the board, once the superintendent's done, the board gets it in like June, and then you have to be done for July 1 for CUSAC. So you are encompassing that time, but I see that you're right, the focus isn't there on a
Yeah.
couple of months. So you lose a couple of key months out of that. So what you could do with that is, instead of having district goals and board goals at this time, you could do it more towards the summer months, where we start in July.
Like towards the end of the year
Yeah,
to
and then that way, if you do it in July, you can adopt in August, and that you really hit the ground running. So then you gain those months back.
Yeah, because I believe, like, in the past couple years, in my opinion, there's been a lot of work that our administration has done over the summer
Yeah.
to try and get us, changes or whatever we need for September. And I just feel like by the time we're doing that evaluation in May, if we haven't accounted for that, like, necessarily, like, as a goal, that 3 months of work isn't even being looked at,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
So, but when you're building it into your meetings, those three times that we talked about, you're really having that discussion. So you'll learn that what they did in those months. So like the first update will talk all about July all the way through, and talk about where they are in the action plans
Okay,
and
so
things like that.
do an update September, then January.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you can get on that cycle. But
Okay.
for right now, I think,
Yeah.
we
Oh,
have
absolutely,
no
yeah.
choice but to do this cycle, but it's a start, right? Because you haven't done it before. And so now this is a really great start.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
My pleasure. Then we're moving on to board-staff relationships, and that was very glowing. So the board values staff and has a respectful, positive relationship, as well as provides public recognition of staff achievements. The board recognizes the importance of a staff PD, and the board treats the staff with courtesy and respect. So I just want to point out that importance about the staff PD. So when I do superintendent searches, we do these input sessions with the staff. And so we really get a lot of knowledge back from the staff, a lot of input. And the one thing they say is the most important thing to them is their professional development, that it's really something that they want and that they can value. So when the board supports that, it really means a lot. So good for you guys that you do that, because it really does mean a lot to our staff, that they, have their voices heard in that, and that they have subject matter, that they're not just checking a box, that it's bringing value to them. So that is constantly the one thing that they bring up all the time. So good for you that you support that. And then the GROWs continue to focus on more public recognition of staff achievements. So that you are doing that, but you felt that you needed to do a little bit more of that. So, sometimes you'll build in 2 recognition days, like really big recognition for maybe retirement in December, the retirements, and then the end of the year retirements, things like that. Years of service, those type of, achievements, and make it a little bit of a party at a board meeting is really nice. And I think it's something that builds that relationship. And then we're going to move on to board and community, which we've pretty much talked about it already. The board promotes a positive image of every child they represent, and the GROW was being formed, maybe an effective community relations program, gathering community input, having voices heard that we talked about that public comment piece, and then bridging that gap between community and school. So, and we did decide that maybe the best course of action with that would be that committee piece of that. So that's good. So we went through all that. You did a great job on that. I'm sorry it was so long, but next year it won't be, so that was good. And I think that there was like a lot of buy-in and valuable knowledge that we gained from that. So thanks for that exercise. So we're going to move on to goal setting. Okay. So when we talk about goals, oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of mics going on here too. So when we talk about goals, so why do we make goals? Why, what's the foundation for goals? And we talked about this. It's effective communication, accountability, that CSA evaluation piece, understanding programming. It all leads to that. So it's super important to set goals and then really take them on and work towards them. So here we are in the cycle, like when we talked about before, once the CSA evaluation is done, so June, July, and August, you would be working on those goals. So next year, we're going to build that right in. But for now, here we are in the fall, and we're going to talk about those goals today. We'll form them, and then we're going to hand them over to the superintendent and the administration, and they're going to come up with those action plans. And what an action plan is it's a strategy on how to get to where we need to be to achieve that goal. So once you do that, you'll come back to the next meeting, the superintendent will go over those action plans, and it'll say, what's that indicator of success? What is the timeline? Who's responsible? What team is going to work on what? You'll know all that through that reporting out of the action plans. And then along the way, you're measuring those results. You're having those 3 meetings that we talked about. And then going into that evaluation process, you'll really be mindful of where you are with those goals. So does this all make sense, the schedule on this? Yeah, so it just flows right into the next task. So this is going to be really helpful in understanding where you are as a district with those goals. And then when you think about a goal, you want it to be, a SMART goal. You want it to be measurable, achievable. You just don't want to have a big word salad that sounds really good, but you're never going to be able to achieve it. So when you do that, you have to make sure that they're realistic, the things that you're putting in there and you're asking the superintendent to do. Is that achievable? Is it measurable? What is the indicator of success? So, what does that timeline look at to achieve that? So just be mindful when we go and talk through these that we are adding those components into those goals. So when you talk about district goals, a lot of times boards get confused. They think that district goals and board goals are one and the same, and they're not. So district goals are owned by the board and the administration, and you come together and you say, okay, what direction do we want for our district to go? What are we going to work on this year that is going to be putting our district to the next level? So when we have these conversations, the board is the what. So it's like what we're looking for, what's that guidance that we're giving to the superintendent and to the administration that we really want to see an achievement. And then the superintendent also brings in certain subject matter to say, hey, this is where I think we should go. And you work on that together. So you both own that. But the board is the what, and the superintendent and his administration is the how. So we don't sit there and say, okay, here's the what, and then this is how you're going to do it. That's not for the board to do. So just be mindful of that. And then when you talk about board goals are owned completely by the board. The board is making like professional development goals for themselves, or a goal that is going to support the district goals and something that the board could do to do that. That's what a board goal is. So it's usually some training pieces and then that support piece as well. So there's definitely differences between district goals and board goals. Any questions on that? And then when we're developing that goal, we're thinking about our vision. You read your mission statement at the meeting, so you're thinking about that. If you had a strategic plan, that comes into play because that's a multi-year type of plan so that you're building upon itself. And then the data that your superintendent brings you, a lot of times you're building that into your goal setting. And then also the previous goals too. Just be mindful, like we talked about, sometimes goals are a 2-year goal or a 3-year goal.